The best thing you can do to win a syndrome is to... I'm Brandon from Brimley Games, and no, I'm not going to leave you hanging like that. The most important thing you can do to win a syndrome is discard, discard, discard. There are certain cards you'll need to win, and two cards in particular that are super helpful to get early in the game. We'll be learning the ins and outs of how to play a syndrome, going over all the cards, and even going over a few tips when playing against syndrome. With all that said, let's jump straight into how syndrome starts the game. The Omnidroid version 8 will start at Villainous Island. These Omnidroids are unique to syndrome, and there are 3 different versions that will come out throughout the game. You have to defeat them in sequential order, and you can never have more than one out at the same time. If they're at the bottom of the board, they can be moved using the move an item or ally action, and they can be used in vanquish actions. The Omnidroids are vital to winning. You have to defeat version 10 as well as have no heroes out in order to win. So, on to version 8. It has a 5 strength and you get rid of it when you use it in a vanquish action. Because of this, it is absolutely vital that you get a hero out as early as possible. So if another player fates you, you can use that to your advantage depending on how far away they place the hero. It could be up to 2 spaces away, which can take quite a bit of time to get the Omnidroid over there and perform the vanquish action. The good news is, like we showed at the beginning of the video, there are 2 cards that can help you out with this. Mirage and 15 Years Later. Mirage is an ally that can help you get a hero out. You will draw cards until you reveal a hero, and that hero will be played to Mirage's location. The others will be discarded. You can use this to your advantage by placing Mirage at the same location as the Omnidroid. But there is one issue with this. You could draw Mr. Incredible, who is a 6 strength. You wouldn't be able to use Omnidroid version 8 to defeat him alone, you'd have to have an ally to help you. Which leads me to my favorite way to get a hero out, 15 Years Later. This is a condition card, and there are 3 of them in the deck. The best part is that the condition is triggered when another player gains power, which happens all the time and makes this card extremely easy to play. When you do, you reveal cards until you get a hero, but you can play them to any location. In this case, you'll want to play it to the Omnidroid's location. And the best part is that hero gets a -2 strength, so you'll be able to use Omnidroid version 8 to vanquish that hero. So once you have a hero at the same location as version 8, you will need to go to one of these 2 locations to perform a vanquish action. Like a normal vanquish action, you will discard both the hero, and then you'll discard the Omnidroid who acts as an ally would. When you remove version 8, the special ability is triggered and you will shuffle the discard pile back into your deck. This may seem minor, but it's a very important part of the game. Sometimes there'll be very few cards in the discard pile, but other times you may have important cards there that get shuffled back into your deck so you can get them later. And you can use this to your advantage by discarding certain cards early in the game, knowing they'll get shuffled back into the deck. Later in the video, we'll go over cards that I would recommend that you keep and others that you would probably be okay to discard. And before we get even deeper into the video talking about versions 9 and 10, we need to go over Syndrome's locations. In my opinion, Syndrome's best location by far is downtown Metroville. You get 3 power, can fate, discard cards, and can play a card. The other location that has a fate action is the Par Residence. It also has a play a card action, a gain 1 power action, and the vanquish action, which is super important to be able to get rid of the Omnidroids. The other location that has the vanquish action is Syndrome's Lair. It also has 2 play a card actions, but gets no power. And finally, Villainous Island, which I think is the second best location that Syndrome has. You gain 2 power, can play up to 2 cards, and discard. As we mentioned at the beginning of the video, discarding is so important for Syndrome's objective. Alright, now it's time to move on to the second Omnidroid, version 9. And in order to play that, you will need a major modification card. Major modification cards are items that can be played anywhere in your realm, and there's 4 of them in the deck. They have no ability, but are what you use to upgrade the Omnidroids. To upgrade to version 9, you will remove the major modification to the discard pile, and then place version 9 to the bottom of the board at any location. This is a free action, does not cost any power, and can be done at any time on your turn, regardless of the location that you're at. And version 9 acts very similar to version 8. You need a hero to be able to vanquish, and it is discarded in the same manner when you perform that vanquish action. If you have a hero out, but they're at a different location than the Omnidroid, then you could use the Identification Please card to move it to that location. This card can instead be used to move an ally to a location that has a hero if you so choose. Quick side note, I've never actually used that card. I just end up discarding it. And in the process of vanquishing version 9, there's a special ability triggered just like with version 8. This ability allows you to find Syndrome's remote from wherever it is and place it into your hand. And this is super important. If you get Syndrome's remote early, you can discard it because you're just going to get it back once version 9 is vanquished. You won't have to keep it in your hand, which frees up extra space and allows you to get through your deck quicker. Okay, so now you got rid of version 9, and your next objective is to bring out version 10. This is going to require 3 major modification cards. As we mentioned earlier, there are only 4 major modifications in the deck, which means you have to use each one of them in order to win. Because of this, this reinforces why it's so important for you to discard as much as possible with Syndrome. And by discarding a lot from the start of the game, you increase your chances of getting out those cards as quickly as possible. The best part about this with Syndrome is that the locations that have the discard action have 3 power or 2 power, which means most of the time you're probably going to want to go there anyways because of how good the locations are. So you can move back and forth between these 2 locations, getting lots of power and discarding cards to get you to the most important ones. Also, there's a super powerful condition card called Not a Sidekick. There are 3 of them in the deck, and this card allows you to draw cards equal to the number discarded by another player. So especially if someone discards a lot of cards, this can be a great way to get through more of your deck. Quick side note, as far as I can tell and what I've heard from you on the live streams, you should be able to play multiple of these cards at the same time, which can get you through even more cards. Another important part about discarding is that instead of paying power to play the cards, you're then keeping that power that you may need later in the game. On the subject of power, there's actually a condition card that helps you gain more power. Who's Super Now allows you to gain power equal to the same amount that another player paid to play a card. And getting a little bit back into the 3 major modifications, we have to discuss monologuing, and that was totally wicked. This comment brought up a really good point that it's hard to get the 3 major modifications when you have these 2 fate cards that are so devastating. Monologuing makes Syndrome discard 3 cards, which can be absolutely horrible if you have multiple major modifications or a major modification and Syndrome's remote in your hand. If this happens, you have to wait until the cards are reshuffled to possibly get them again. And that was totally wicked discards all, yes, all of your allies and all of your items. And even more devastating than losing your allies is losing a major modification, because in the same way as monologuing, you have to wait until it gets reshuffled to be able to get those cards back. So my best piece of advice against these 2 fate cards is to keep tabs on which fate cards have already come out. So if you see one of these cards in the discard pile, you can change your strategy accordingly, either holding more cards in your hand or playing more out to try to avoid the other one that may still be in the deck. These cards are super devastating, so you have to move fast. If you're able to successfully dodge these fate cards and get out the 3 major modifications, you can then use the free action like before to discard the major modifications and now bring out version 10. But where do you place version 10? This is actually a question from Ken in our survey. Yeah, so in the other video we made, we explained it one way, and then in diving deeper into the rules for this video, we determined that that was not exactly accurate. So here's a better explanation. Here goes. So Omnidroid version 10 is going to be played to downtown Metroville. If Syndrome's remote is not in the realm, you will place version 10 at the top of the board. But if Syndrome's remote is in the realm, you're going to play it on the opposite side of the board. And from what I understand, you're still going to place it to downtown Metroville. You just place it either on the top of the board or the bottom of the board, depending on who's in possession of Syndrome's remote. Speaking of Syndrome's remote, let's dive a little bit deeper into that. This card is a remote. It's not an item, which means it's not discarded by That Was Totally Wicked, which is super important. This card will also add an activate ability to the location that is at, which is how it defeats version 10. The issue arises that when you play Syndrome's remote, if a hero is then played, you will attach Syndrome's remote to that hero. This will happen with all heroes except for Jack-Jack. But before we break down each of the heroes, we had an important question about version 10. Their question was, when a hero takes the remote, do you move the Omnidroid? And the answer is yes. You will place the Omnidroid at the same location on the opposite side of the board as Syndrome's remote. Okay, let's break down the different heroes and what their abilities are. Frozone is a 3 strength, and allies at his location are frozen and cannot be moved, which I think is a super clever game design choice. Mr. Incredible is a 6 strength and gets an additional strength for each other hero at his location. So if you stack up heroes on that same location, Mr. Incredible can get even more powerful. And for Frozone and Mr. Incredible, these abilities are ongoing, whereas the rest of them that we'll discuss are one-time abilities. Elastigirl is a 4 strength. When she's played, you may discard an ally from her location. Violet is a 3 strength, and when she's played, you discard all of the 0-point energy cards that are in the realm. Dash is a 2 strength, and when he's played, you may move any hero that's in the realm to his location. And finally, Jack-Jack. Again, he does not take Syndrome's remote, but instead gains strength equal to the hero at his location that has the most strength. So at that time, you will add the strength tokens to him. For example, if you play Jack Jack to Mr. Incredible's location, you will add 5 strength to him, bringing him up to a 6 strength, which is equal to Mr. Incredible. And from what I understand, if a hero already has the remote and you play a new hero into the realm, it sounds like you will move the remote to that hero as it's still in the realm, which is what the card says. One of the most important parts about winning with Syndrome is that you have to defeat version 10. But there's another part that you have to remember. Even if you defeat version 10, if there are heroes left, you don't win quite yet. You still have to get rid of all the heroes. So if you have version 10 out and there are a lot of heroes, there's something you can do that is really helpful. When you use version 10 in a Vanquish action, you don't have to discard it like you did with 8 and 9. This can be a super good way to get rid of a lot of different heroes. Now, this only works if one of the heroes has the remote, because that's the only way that Omnidroid version 10 will be at the bottom of the board. And once you defeat that hero, version 10 will move to the top of the board. So if you want to take out a lot of the different heroes, you're going to need to take out all of the other ones before you defeat that last hero that is in control of the remote. And if you're unable to use version 10 in that way, or possibly have already defeated version 10, here's 3 different ways that you can defeat some of those heroes. First off, you can use the allies, and Syndrome has 4 different allies that he can use. He has 2 security cards that cost 1 power and have 2 strength. They have no ability, but are fairly cheap and have a decent amount of strength. There are 3 guards that cost 2 power and have 1 strength. These do, however, get an additional strength for each other ally at their location, so when stacked up they can become pretty powerful. There are 3 Velocipod patrols that cost 2 power and have a strength of 3. And these are especially nice because they can vanquish heroes at their location as well as at adjacent locations. So if you place them in one of the middle 2 locations, they can attack heroes at 3 different locations. And finally, there is 1 Mirage card. We discussed her ability earlier on getting out a hero, but besides that, she costs 3 power and is a strength of 2. So if you used her earlier in the game to get out a hero, you can now use her later to defeat a hero. The second way to defeat heroes is using 0 point energy and containment unit. There are 2 of each of these cards. The 0 point energy is an item that's attached to a hero. That hero now has -2 strength and cannot be moved. If this were to happen to a hero such as Dash, who has 2 strength, this would bring him down to 0. If this happens, you can vanquish him using no allies just by going to one of the 2 vanquish actions. But the second card is even more powerful. Containment unit makes the hero lose all of their strength. And yes, this works even for Mr. Incredible. So like we mentioned with the previous one, by getting them down to 0, you can now use a vanquish action using no allies. And the third way to defeat a hero is by using the condition card Bioprobe. There are 2 of these in the deck, and when another player defeats a hero in their realm, you can defeat a hero in your realm that is at equal or lower strength from the hero that they defeated. Okay, back to the remote. And we had another question asking if the remote has to be at the same location as version 10. The answer is yes, because the remote brings an activate ability to that location. And since the card says that Syndrome has to be at the same location as version 10 in order to perform this activate ability, he does have to be at that same location. So you have to have Syndrome as well as the remote and version 10 at the same location in order to defeat version 10. So when you have all 3 there, you can activate the remote and defeat version 10. If there are no heroes in the realm, you win. But if there are any left, you have to get rid of all of them before you do. The Omnidroid version 10 will remain flipped over and can no longer be moved. So overall, you're going to need to discard a lot of cards to get out those 4 major modifications, as well as other cards you may need. So the question arises, which do you need to keep and which should you get rid of? And I'm going to preface this by saying I like to discard a lot, if you haven't already noticed from this video. First up, Syndrome's remote, which is super easy. If you have not defeated version 9, discard it. If you have defeated version 9, do not discard it. Next, let's discuss the items, major modifications, and 0 point energy. Major modifications. At the beginning of the game, if you start with a lot of them, you could discard them because once you defeat version 8, they'll get shuffled back into the deck. But after you defeat version 8, do not discard them. And I'm just going to say, if you're going to discard them before version 8, discard them with caution because these are very important for Syndrome to win. 0 point energy. If I didn't have any heroes out that I wanted to play this on, I would probably discard it to get to the necessary cards. Next up are the effects, containment unit and identification please. Containment unit is a very powerful way to get rid of heroes, but just like 0 point energy, if it's early enough in the game and I don't have any heroes, I would probably discard these. Identification please. I don't think I've used this one yet. I've discarded it every single time. So it obviously has a very specific use, but in my experience, I've discarded it every time. Next are the allies: Security, Guards, Velocipede Patrol, and Mirage. With the three main allies, Security, Guards, and Velocipede Patrol, if it's early in the game, I would probably discard these because I don't want to lose them to That Was Totally Wicked, and especially if I don't have any heroes out, I don't see the need to play them that early in the game. Mirage, on the other hand, if you start with her in your hand, that is amazing. As we discussed earlier, that's a great way to get out a hero early in the game for versions 8 or 9. But if you have enough heroes already to vanquish with version 8 and version 9, then I would discard Mirage because there's no reason in my mind to bring an extra hero out after that point. Next up are the condition cards: Not a Sidekick, Who's Super Now, Bioprobe, and 15 Years Later. Not a Sidekick and Who's Super Now are super easy conditions to complete, so I would most likely not discard them. I would use them and get their benefit to either pick up cards or gain power, depending on which card it was. But the other two are a bit trickier. Bioprobe has a very specific use, so if I don't have any heroes out, or it looks like it's going to be a while before my opponent defeats a hero, I would probably discard it. Like we mentioned earlier, 15 Years Later is an amazing card to start with, so if you have it early in the game, I would use it to get out a hero to vanquish with version 8 and version 9, and if you get it after that point where you already have enough heroes with version 9, just like Mirage, I would discard it because you have no need to get more heroes out. Another important part about playing as any villain in Disney Villainous is knowing how to react to fading. So we're going to run over a few scenarios, the first of which is what happens if the top of your board is completely covered by heroes, blocking and limiting your actions. If that happened, here is what the potential actions would look like. Vanquish with gain 1 power, discard cards with play a card with move an item or ally, and fading with gaining 3 power. In this scenario, I would suggest opening up Syndrome's lair as quickly as possible. This will open up the second location that has a vanquish action and potentially allow you to get rid of the other heroes a bit faster. If you don't have any useful cards, make sure to go to Nomanison Island to use the discard card actions and cycle through until you get the cards that can help you get rid of the heroes. Even when it's partially covered, downtown Metroville is still a great location to go to. You can gain 3 power and use the fade action to potentially cover up one of your opponent's fade actions and hinder them or slow them down a bit from playing more heroes on you. The next scenario I want to discuss is a really sad one. What do you do if you lose a major modification or Syndrome's remote to That Was Totally Wicked or monologuing? If this happens, you'll want to do these two things. First off, you're going to want to focus on fading the other player or players to hinder them from continuing to fate you. This will hopefully slow them down a bit and give you some time to cycle back through the deck. This will probably work better in a 2-player game, since when you get too many people, if you're trying to fate everybody, then they may all come at you and it might get worse than it was before. That being said, even if you're playing with a lot of players, you're going to have to be on the offensive at this point. You are now playing the long game trying to get through your deck, so you're going to have to watch where they are at and slow down and target the person who's closest to winning. The second thing you should do is discard, discard, discard. You're going to need to get through the deck as fast as you can. And again, be on the lookout for Not a Sidekick. This is the card, as we mentioned earlier, that will help you get through your deck faster. And now let's discuss the rest of the Fate cards, as well as some tips for playing against Syndrome. We went over the heroes earlier, along with That Was Totally Wicked and monologuing, which leaves us with No Capes, Force Field, Infiltrate, and Teamwork. There are 2 No Capes cards, and they force Syndrome to stay at the same location for his next turn. You're not going to have a lot of control with this, but just be aware of which locations are the best locations for Syndrome, and try to use the other card if he's at a good location already. But if you think it's a good idea to keep him at that spot, definitely play that card and hopefully slow him down a bit. There are 2 Teamwork cards in the deck, which allow you to play both Fate cards. You get to use both Teamwork and the other one that you draw. With this card, you look at the top 6 cards of the Fate deck and then return them to the top in any order. This can help you strategize about which cards you need to come out first and which cards you would rather have come out a bit later. On our Syndrome survey, Ken had the question about what you do if you have less than 6 cards in the Fate deck. And from my understanding, if this happens, you'll just shuffle the deck so that you can get 6 cards to look at and reorder them any way you would like. There are 2 Force Field cards that can be attached to a hero. When the hero would be defeated, you're going to discard that card instead, which allows the hero to stay at that location a little bit longer. This can be really detrimental to Syndrome, as he has to get rid of all the heroes in order to win. However, this can actually work in Syndrome's favor if you play it when version 8 is out. Now Syndrome can use this hero as part of the Vanquish action with version 9. He won't have to find and bring out another hero to use. There is one Infiltrate card that will force Syndrome to reveal his hand to the other players. From my understanding, this is a one-time effect, and then you can bring it back into your hand and have your cards in secret once again. Now you may be wondering which locations you should target with your fates. Let's start from the first one. The Paw Residence is a good place to start if you want to avoid players fading you. You will be able to cover up both a play a card action and the fade action. This will make it so they can only gain one power and vanquish, and since vanquishing is so important to move Syndrome's objective along, this is a really good place to start. Next, Nomanisan Island. Now, since version 8 starts here, I would not want to play a hero here earlier in the game, as that would help Syndrome. And as I mentioned earlier, I would consider this as the second best location in Syndrome's realm. You get to gain 2 power, play 2 cards, and discard. And like I've mentioned multiple times in this video, the best thing Syndrome can do is discard a lot to get the cards that he needs. So being able to hinder a location where he has to go to discard would be a very good move for you to do. This would bring the potential actions down to playing 1 card and discarding. Third, Syndrome's Lair. Fading here would block a play a card action as well as a vanquish action. Doing this would make it harder for Syndrome to get rid of heroes, so this could be a good place to target. This would bring the location down to 1 play a card action and the move an item or ally action. And lastly, the best location in my opinion is downtown Metroville. This location has so many options. You can gain 3 power, fate, play a card, and discard cards. So in my opinion, it's a very good idea to target this one early and limit how much Syndrome can do. Additionally, this is the furthest location from Nomanisan Island, which is where the version 8 Omnidroid begins. Placing the hero here can make it a bit harder for Syndrome to get rid of that hero if he wants to use the Omnidroid, because he would have to move it 2 locations. Here's a couple of general tips for fading Syndrome. First, be careful when fading. We had a comment that brought up a good point. Sometimes we end up fading too much, and it's actually helpful to the opponent. So it's good to understand when is a good time to fade and when is not a good time. If Syndrome doesn't have any heroes out with version 8, I would suggest not fading him and not playing any heroes. If you're going to fade with version 8 or 9 out, you're going to want to do it a lot or not at all. Doing just a little bit at a time can actually help Syndrome. There is a tipping point, however. Once version 9 is out and there's at least 1 hero, playing more heroes is no longer going to help Syndrome, it's only going to hurt him. So when you reach this point in the game, you can fade as much as you'd like. Another great time to fade is when there are major modifications out. Even getting rid of one of them would set Syndrome back a ton. There are only 4 major modifications in the deck, and Syndrome needs each and every one of them. And next, you're definitely going to want to check out this